We're here today to hear personal stories about moments that have helped 5 people expand their ideas about what is possible in education, ranging from centering joy in learning, student agency, student autonomy, celebrating differences, the role of mental health in education, and rethinking our individual notions of success. The speakers you will hear tonight come from across the United States. They submitted stories as part of a call from KnowledgeWorks, and were selected to engage in a storytelling workshop and then receive personal coaching facilitated by The Moth, a nonprofit group dedicated to the art and craft of storytelling. First, please allow me to introduce our CEO, Bill Hite. He's to say a few words just about today's event. Bill?
Thanks, Virgil, and welcome everyone. And thank you for being here. We are very excited about this opportunity and this event. My name is Bill Hite, CEO of KnowledgeWorks. I would like to begin by thanking our speakers, Emily Berman, Nancy Klein, Samaya Wright, Abby Kerrigan, and Brittany Terry, as well as my colleagues from KnowledgeWorks, quite a few of them are on the line, and the coaches and staff members at The Moth. Thank you so much for helping and providing support to all of the individuals whose voices we will hear from shortly. KnowledgeWorks is a national nonprofit whose work is driven by the belief that learners deserve the kinds of educational experiences that center their needs, interests, and passions. They deserve to feel like they belong and have the power to make choices about their futures, not just about what they'll be, but who. Personalized, competency-based learning is how we make that happen. As you hear from each of the speakers tonight, I invite you all to think about a moment that changed your thinking about what was possible, what you could do with your life, or who you could be, about how education, your life, your community, or even the world at large might be different if we were to work in service of possibility. So with that, Virgil, I'll turn it back over to you. And once again, welcome everyone.
Thanks so much, Bill. Today's storytellers are not directly affiliated with KnowledgeWorks, and their stories do not involve our work. But yet, we at KnowledgeWorks are big believers in the power of stories. Stories help us to entertain, teach, share information, and build community. Stories can be cautionary, but they can also help us imagine what could be and what should be. They convey what's important to the storyteller and can also communicate what new futures and new realities might look like. Sharing your stories takes courage, and we appreciate all of you for helping us to create a brave space for our storytellers. It's a vulnerable thing to get in front of people and share something of yourself. It's also through that bravery, through storytelling, that we can make connections with each other. Now it's my great pleasure to bring up our first storyteller, Emily Berman, whose teaching career changed when she centered joy in her classroom. Thank you, Emily.
I'm sitting in the office that the school psychologist usually uses. It's windowless, painted blue. It has 2 mahogany tables and some office chairs. And I'm sitting with my mentor teacher, John. He has a camcorder and he's flipped out the side view camera, and we're watching a video of my lesson the previous period. It's 2014. He definitely has a smartphone, but for some reason he's recorded me on an actual video camera. And he presses play, and 2 things pop out at me as I'm watching myself. 1, my voice is high-pitched, too high-pitched. 2, I keep making this like repetitive motion with my fingers, not really sure what I'm trying to illustrate there. I'm very distracted by this, but I'm also distracted by the color of my shirt and the fact that everyone looks bored. I look bored, my students look bored. Watching the video kind of turns into watching a horror film for me. I feel like I want to plug my ears and close my eyes, and it seems to go on forever. Finally, mercifully, John closes the side view camera, turns to me and says, "Are you having fun doing this?" For context, John, my mentor teacher at the time, is like a modern lumberjack. He has a beard, wears flannels, has this big booming voice, and is always smiling. He's kind of the exact opposite of me when I began teaching. He was relaxed in the classroom. I was rigid, worried I wouldn't reach my goal for the day. worried I was harming students in unknowable ways because of the privilege and power that I hold. From that video, it was clear that John was having fun and I was not. I thought teaching was supposed to be orderly and precise. When I was in graduate school, my professor handed me a graphic organizer to structure my lesson plans. And let me tell you, I'm a girl who loves a graphic organizer. I loved having my thoughts be structured and precise, my steps be orderly and methodological. Looking back on it, I thought that I got into teaching because I love science, and I do. I really enjoy physics and biology, the subjects I teach. But I think what I really love is like preciseness and order and detail more than anything else. But this aspect of my personality was not translating well into my classroom teaching, and I couldn't really figure out why until I watched that video. I can't remember any of the specifics of what happened after John asked me that question, but it was my pivotal moment, my aha. It was this radical introduction of fun and joy and something that had never been emphasized to me before. And it's something I really try to hold myself to every day. I became committed to being the teacher that prioritized joy. At this first job, joy popped up where I least expected it. It was in the center of the mosh pit at every school dance. It was when Josh, in his black beanie and white Doc Martens, came up with inside jokes for the class as we prepared for our Socratic seminar on nuclear science. Joy was when my engineering students made Rube Goldberg machines, and those machines totally failed, and they spilled marbles all across the floor, the red orbs ricocheting off of every desk. It was a total nightmare to clean up. In the year that I student taught with John, and in the 4 subsequent years that we were colleagues, he taught me that teaching was messy and malleable and an art form. And he raised the most important question I've ever been asked in my career. It really showed me that when you have a strong ally and strong leadership in schools, you and your students can prioritize joy. Flash forward 5 years, I'm in a new school and a new state. It's a school that's bigger, and the roles for teachers and students are very different. And it's also after the pandemic. After all the ways that inequities in education and teaching and learning have been exposed, and how we squandered that chance at rebirth. I'm thinking about how every student got a laptop and Wi-Fi was deemed a necessary utility. I'm thinking about how we got rid of standardized testing as a metric of success, and how celebrities wrote songs about how teachers should get paid $1 billion a day. But then overnight, we went back to education as if nothing had really happened. And we gave up this opportunity for like real liberation in our education. And with that, I think I lost some of my joy. I still think joy is the most important question or thing to prioritize, but it's becoming harder and harder to feel it in my classroom. Last month at my current school in Virginia, I did an activity centered on college and career readiness and life after high school. The goal was to get my juniors sort of familiar with how to sort of like look up what they wanted to do after they graduated. And I was blown away by how my students engaged with this task. There was like this fervor, phones were away. Everyone was like really committing out loud to all the things they wanted to do and be. People were saying they wanted to be computer scientists and mechanical engineers and doctors and veterinarians and forensic psychologists. And I just thought to myself, how could they possibly know which of these will actually make them happiness? How can I help them find what will bring them joy? A few minutes later, my student Michael called me over, AirPods in his ears, clad in a matching sweatsuit, which he made clear to let me know was all Balenciaga. And he turned to me very earnestly and said, well, why did you want to become a teacher? Do you like this job? In that moment, I froze. When Michael asked me the same question essentially that John asked me, but 9 years later, it hit differently because I have less confidence now than I ever did before. When you have joy radiating throughout the whole building, between staff outside the classroom, that's when you can have joy inside the classroom. And that's what I had at my first position. I think back to my most challenging days at my first school. It was called Senior Day. It was when we had the seniors in to submit their college applications. It was a grueling day. We were at school until like 8 p.m., making sure everyone submitted their work. It was rounds of essays, dealing with tech issues, financial aid forms, lots of tears. But through it all, we had this adult community that used it as a moment to reflect and find joy. We thought about how we'd grown over the past 4 years. We knew our students and thought about how they had grown. And it really showed me that if the adults in a building don't have a joyful community, kids won't either. And I credit this to strong leadership. So in my first job, through all this frustration and exhaustion, I was still having fun. Now I'm in a different situation and it's harder to answer that role. I feel like I'm in a totally different world and I'm struggling with this question. I really wonder how we're making students feel in the classroom today. And just as importantly, how do we make teachers feel? It makes me think about what is our purpose in school. I realize I might have lost a little bit of joy over the past few years, and I'm not totally sure what the answer is to Michael's question, but I'm really grateful he asked me it. Our education should be joyful for both students and teachers. I'm still trying to find my joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing your story in those words. It's a great example of how what we shared earlier, that stories are an entry point to understanding different experiences. And in this case, our experiences as a teacher, and especially on the first day, and your great description helped bring back those emotions, those feelings, the excitement, the anxiety, the heartburn, Emily. So thank you for raising such great, purposeful, driven questions. So with that, I'd like to take a moment to ask the educators that are joining us tonight, both current or former, such as myself, to share in chat one word that described how you felt during your first year of teaching or your first few years of teaching. Please do so in chat. Really appreciate that. Again, take a moment to share in a word or a phrase, how would you describe how you felt in your first year of teaching? I'm feeling these: unprepared, drowning, overwhelmed, imposter syndrome. I still get that all the time. Yeah, it's excited, hopeful. I love that. Fake it till you make it. All of these resonate. Optimistic, loved by littles, fake. Yes to all of those. Absolutely. Thank you for that tremendous first start, Emily. Really appreciate you sharing your story and yourself. Really means a lot to us. Now it's my pleasure to bring up our next storyteller, Nancy Klein, who is going to talk to us about learning to trust her instincts. Nancy, thank you for sharing your story.
It's not that I was a quiet child. I was a chatterbox in school. On the first day of kindergarten, I was banished to the corner for talking to my friend during rest time. And once I told my brother to shut up, my mother washed my mouth out with soap, threatening lie the next time. My father was a master litigator, turned dinner time into agonizing rounds of cross-examination with a simple, "How was school today?" My parents voiced their ideas, their beliefs about just about anything with passionate exactitude. I prayed for invisibility. My brother summed it up best. Believe whatever you want, as long as you agree with them. We knew who ran the show. Feeling I had nothing to share, I remained silent. I found my voice through creativity and imagination. Desperate for red party shoes, once during rest time, I took the red shoe polish made for my red school shoes and slathered it onto my black patent leather ones. Well, of course, it didn't work. I ended up with two little black boats drowning in a sea of red. School was a challenge. I struggled to read, hated math, was labeled lazy, she should just try harder, never shared any creativity, never felt smart, always felt stupid. More often than not, changed the right answer to the wrong one. And I was under the delusional belief that you did not have to be smart to work with young kids. At the age of 10, I started babysitting every chance I could get, never looked back. That was it. Work with little kids, no one older than the age of 4. An image indelibly etched into my brain from my beginning years of teaching is of a 4-year-old catapulting himself down the hall. Teacher behind, walking slowly. Walk. He whips around, hands on hips. You're not the boss of my legs. There it was. Textbook definition of 4-year-olds, the first adolescence. I fell in love. I fell in love with that energy, that proclamation, that defiance. And I loved the opportunity that it provided me to think of all of the ways I could to let them know exactly who was the boss, while all the while letting them think that they were. You take that proclamation, that determination, that defiance, multiply it by 20, and you certainly could have classroom chaos. Lineup time, case in point. She stepped on my feet. No, she did. No, I'm first. She got in the way. Get out. Go. Control with words did not work. Piece of tape on the floor did. 20 circles for 20 feet. Feet in circles, hands by sides, eyes straight ahead, quiet as a mouse, walk through the hall. Total control, and I did not turn into the no, don't lady. I wasn't the only one put to the 4-year-old control test. Parents had more than their fair share. During those early years, I didn't always trust my classroom instincts enough to help parents navigate the bumpy terrain of parenting their young teenagers. Until I did. Tina, who looked more of a 2-year-old than a 4-year-old, was not your typical 4-year-old in my class. She was quiet, never peeped from her in either defiance or agreement. Some might say she was the perfect child, not me. One Friday, for the 5th day in a row, Max, her father, and Tina arrived late to school. Get everybody settled, Max corners me. I do not know what to do. She's driving me crazy. We leave the apartment. We get down to the lobby. She will not go out. She will not put on her shoes and socks. 30 minutes of kicking and screaming until finally I shove her feet into the socks myself, and here we are, 30 minutes late for the 5th day in a row. Tell me what to do. Nothing, I said. Nothing? Nothing. Take her hand with the other hand to hold on to her shoes and socks and walk to school. What? He screams. Walk 10 New York City blocks to school in the freezing cold barefoot? Are you crazy? She won't, I said. What? She won't walk 10 city blocks to school. Trust me. Monday morning, Max and Tina arrive early. Tina's dressed head to toe. Hangs up her coat. Max says, well, you were right. She's 1 foot on the bare pavement, and she sits down, grabs her shoes and socks, puts them on, and here we are. Tina must be over 40 now. I wonder about her. What does her voice look and sound like? And what about me? I haven't been in an early childhood classroom for years. I'm a reading specialist in a high school. A few weeks ago, I was helping Jonathan write his college essay. After weeks of listening for and then finding and putting his voice on paper, I read the final draft out loud. Jonathan, through a half smile, says, "It's really me, isn't it?" My hesitancy and self-doubt has morphed into the confidence to trust my intuition and own my voice. By finding my voice, I help others find theirs, which in turn strengthens mine. 4-year-olds, adolescents all want to be seen and heard for who they really are. So do I. Thank you.
Nancy, thank you. I found myself writing down a few of your quotes and some that take me back into the classroom as well. You're not the boss of my legs. You're not the boss of a lot of things, right, that our kids tell us. I don't know what to do. How often do we hear that, right? And yet it's just the simple solutions that help them to find their own answers. And then the most interesting one that really hit home, Nancy, and knowing my voice helps me to find theirs. It's just so, so powerful, Nancy. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing those stories. And I can't wait to hear more about these red shoes as well. But I did some digging, and Nancy, the way you told the story, and um, it helps me to think about what I'd seen and heard from others as I was thinking about this, hearing your stories today. And someone said, one of my friends told me, when someone tells us their own personal story, we catch a glimpse of a view of the world that might be slightly or radically different from our own. When we see the world as they see it, or walk in their shoes, maybe their red shoes, the experience can inspire empathy within them. And I'm feeling that through this story and really appreciate what you had shared. Thank you so much. I'm delighted to introduce our next storyteller, Samaya Wright, whose story is about a time she chose honesty. Samaya, thank you so much.
Writing is my favorite class. Mrs. Spears, she was a strict teacher, but she was also the writing teacher. So I wanted to do the best. One day, I was at home watching Cartoon Network, and I think Teen Titans Go is better than Teen Titans personally. I'm sorry. But we were learning about poems around this time. So what I wanted to be that stuck up kid and be extra, even though I'm not getting extra credit. Around this time, I wasn't feeling the best, so there's nothing better to write about, right? So the next day, I present the poem to my teacher, and her crickets were really loud. But ultimately, she did compliment my work, so I thought I achieved. She did have a follow up question, though, to print out my poem. And who am I, an 11-year-old, to say no to a teacher? So that day, I get picked up from school from my mom, and before I get out of the car, she asks if she can have a conversation with me. I didn't think I messed up in front of her, so I had no issue with that. She told me that my teacher was concerned about me because of my poem. She told me that I could be labeled as the depressed kid. Now, me being 11, I didn't have the willpower to pick up my iPod and look up what depressed meant. So I let her talk, and then I went back upstairs to watch my Teen Titans Go. I was the kid where I wasn't necessarily popular, but everyone knew about me and didn't have an issue with me. This year, I decided I wanted to try to make new friends because I was tired of talking about Justice, which was a popular little girls' store when I was young, with anyone but my mom. But these girls, they didn't want to be my friend. They wanted to be my friend's friend. And with that, mixed with a lot of stress, it took a big toll on me in sixth grade. I became that depressed kid my mom told me I could be labeled as. If I wasn't in the ER, I was at a hospital. If I wasn't at a hospital, I was at a safe house. There was always something. So it got bad to the point where the doctors thought it wasn't no point to send me home because I was just going to be back the next day. So one fateful day, they decided to send me to a long-term residential. They picked me up that same day and they put me in the back of an ugly tan minivan with a paper and two crayons. And we took the 4-hour drive to get to the prison. We pulled up to an enormous building. It was an off-white paint, and then there's a couple circles around because that was their logo. And you could see a few windows, but the paint ultimately swallowed those. Me and the two ladies walked to the tall door. They punched in their 6-digit code. We got inside, and I got to the nursing unit. At the nursing unit, you have to get your strip search, and then you have to get your items authorized. I had a notebook that had my whole life. I was at the hospital, and they had to rip out half of it because it wasn't to their standards. I got on the unit and I realized that this wasn't just going to be no week and a half stay like all my other ones was. Fast forward 4 days before my 12th birthday. If you guys know, your 12th birthday, turning a preteen is more important than turning a teen. And I thought there was some way they can accommodate me being able to see my family. But because I was there for such a short amount of time and it wasn't a visitation day, I wasn't able to. So I spent my 12th birthday with a nurse telling me happy birthday because she saw it on my chart while giving me medicine. And at dinner, I had that stale cupcake with like the crusted over vanilla icing with like the little dull colored sprinkles. And with this, it really shows you that no one's going to go above and beyond for you to even get you a Sam's Club cake. But once you really get into program, you can really see how it's like jail. You get counted for everything. How many times you use the bathroom, when you wash your hair, how much food you eat off of your plate, and they count those as points, how you interact with other students, etc. Then you're living with 10 other girls. So you have 10 sisters in there. So there's the petty dating drama, there's the petty not liking another girl drama, then you guys are best friends, there's the people stealing stuff, and the list can go on. So with all of this, it's just like prison. You don't get any privacy, period. So after dealing with all of this for a certain amount of time, I decided to stop being so naive and actually take a reality check. Why am I here? A staff member there, I ended up having a conversation with her, and I don't know why I decided to listen to her, but I did, and I'm really glad I did. So after that conversation, all I did was write because when you're writing, you can't get in trouble. And then I started getting kudos from staff. So it made me really think I was going in the right direction. The next day, I went for my weekly therapy sessions, and my therapist told me we were going to do a safety plan. I didn't think anything of it because I'm so used to it. We finished, and she ends up asking me, when do we usually do safety plans? I tell her when I get discharged. And the amount of love and hate for her I had in that moment was undescribable. She told me my mom was going to be there at 9 p.m. So fast forward to 8:50. I'm saying my goodbyes to the girls. I had a nice time with you guys, but I never want to see you again. Finally, a little bit after 9, they told me my mom was here. So they walked me out the door, the same lady who wanted to have a conversation with me. And they walked me up the stairs, and I see my mom and my grandparents filling out some paperwork and finishing up. After that, a shorter lady walked us down to like that 20-foot glass door, having to punch in her 6-digit code one more time. And I did not look back after I went through that door. Like it was so bad. Our car was facing the door, so I had to close my eyes to get in. So we got in the car, we took that 4-hour drive back, and I was there for 33 days and nights. All I could think about on that ride was everything I missed at home and at school, though. So I get back to school not too long later, and my teacher, Mrs. Anderson, pulls me aside. She tells me if I ever need to talk to anyone to come talk to her because she knows I'm better than this. And that motivation I need, she knows she can give me. She asked if I had a piece of paper, and all I had was my glittery pink happy planner that I begged my mom to buy for $30. So she took it and she wrote her number down, and all I could think about is this is legal. But she knew a lot more than I did. I might have missed a lot of things while I was in those places, but I did not miss field day. So field day comes around and I get to enjoy every bit of it. The burnt hot dogs, the popsicles in the cardboard, capture the flag, that plunger game where you put water in it and you try and run to the other side. And then that stupid game where you tie your ankles together and you're trying to run, but ultimately you guys fall over. And I got to just sit on the bleachers and reminisce about life like I'm in Fuji with a pina colada. And it was so different from how I was because I couldn't even use the bathroom without someone outside of the door. So once I get out of my delusional state after field day, I come to the realization that I've missed so much school. So I'm not gonna graduate. I'm gonna get held back. But at least I know some of the people in the younger grades. But I come to a realization at some point, my teacher, Mrs. Anderson, and my dean, Mr. Terry, they both were my biggest advocates. And they knew that even though I was a little behind, I could catch up. So I passed 6th grade when everyone else did. I went to 7th grade, and I'm not going to say it was perfect, but I did it. And then I went to 8th grade. I graduated from 8th grade. And then now I'm 15, about to graduate at 16. With this experience, you really learn that you can lose anything in a snap. And middle schoolers, especially, will take that for granted. And we all need to just stop doing that. Thank you.
Samaya, wow. I can feel your words coming from Michigan. It's just so inspiring. And thank you for sharing yourself and your story and your journey. And I don't know if you know this, Samaya, but neuroscience says that there's this evidence that suggests that when I'm hearing and listening to you tell your story, that our brain patterns begin to mirror one another, that we are actually connecting, and that the empathy that I'm feeling is not just on the emotional level, which I think many of us are probably feeling having heard your story, but at a physical level as well. So I'm just so grateful for you sharing your story, and just so very proud to hear how you have tackled those challenges and how your early graduation is just going to set up your next step and your next journey. And so very proud. And I know your mom's on here listening as well. Kudos to each of you. And I did some digging as I was listening, Samaya. And for those that don't know, the entry kind of phrase for Teen Titans Go, their theme song, when there's trouble, you know who to call. Teen Titans. From their tower, they can see it all. Teen Titans. When there's evil on the attack, you can rest knowing they've got your back. Because when the world needs heroes on patrol, Teen Titans go. That's you, Samaya, overtaking that, addressing world's challenges, addressing it head on. Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that story, Samaya. Really appreciate you. So we are going to, at this moment, take a little break, an intermission, about 5 minutes. Please feel free to step away from your computers, grab a glass of water, stretch those legs. But remember, we're not the boss of all of our legs, so just be wary of that. But while we're doing that, we're going to play a short video during the break. But use the time as you need, and we'll rejoin for more stories you won't want to miss. See you in 5 minutes. Thank you all.
Here at KnowledgeWorks, we work with partners in states and schools, and we help them to align their policy and practice in order to reimagine education for the learners. And we think that personalized, competency-based learning is the way that happens.
The traditional system decides when a student is ready to move on because we've gotten to the end of the calendar year. They may have earned a D grade or a C grade, and we've decided that's sufficient to move that student on. As those students progress through the education system, they have huge gaps in learning that become bigger problems as they mature. And then they graduate and they find that they don't have the skills to really succeed.
Oftentimes in a traditional system, it's about the person in the front of the room. But in systems that are much more learner-centered, it's about ensuring that we're meeting the needs of each unique individual that we're serving.
When you hear a 20-year veteran teacher saying, I would never go back. I've done this personalized learning work now for 2 years. You can't ever make me go back to a traditional classroom. And we are seeing that more and more in our districts.
When we talk about personalized competency-based learning, we're not saying that we hope all learners achieve their aspirations. We're essentially guaranteeing that they have the opportunity to excel.
That's why I come to work every day, and that's why I'm so passionate about educational approaches that give and make more relevant the educational experience for young people.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're interested in more stories like that, you can subscribe to our newsletter at knowledgeworks.org/subscribe. We have enjoyed some great stories already and have 2 more to go. So far, we have heard stories about centering joy in teaching, becoming a champion for autonomy in the classroom, and confronting mental health challenges and notions of academic success. Now, please join me in welcoming our next guest speaker, Abby Kerrigan, whose story explores what it means to shift your thinking. Thank you, Abby.
It's just after 3:30 on a Tuesday afternoon, and I'm standing in my kitchen looking out the window. I'm nervous because my son Finn is late walking home from school. It's only a half-mile walk through our tree-filled neighborhood, but he's only 8 years old, and I always worry. Something you should know about Finn is he's twice exceptional. He's gifted with an extremely high verbal comprehension, while at the same time, his dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD means he struggles with reading, writing, and acting like everyone else. He's fiercely independent. He regularly wears mismatched socks, prefers his clothes worn inside out, and is never scared to ask as many questions as necessary until he feels he fully understands something. He loves to explore the world and let his mind wander, and he's got a lot of energy. So the independence and freedom he gets from these walks home is something that's really important to him. So I breathe a sigh of relief as I finally see his mop of floppy brown hair and his big backpack bouncing along up the street to our house. And as soon as he comes in the door, I pounce on him with questions. Is everything okay? Did something happen? Why were you late? And he says, yeah, something funny did happen. Somebody pulled over and asked me if I was okay and wanted a ride. Now, in that moment, I'm trying to stay calm, but all sorts of worst case scenarios are running through my mind. But I take a deep breath and I say, well, that's kind of strange. Why do you think that might have happened? And he thinks for a minute, and then he looks at me and says, it might have been because I was standing and staring at a tree for a really long time. I noticed some ants on the bark, and I watched them crawl along in between the pieces of bark on the tree up towards the top where I noticed some birds, and I thought about where they had been and where they might be going. And then I noticed how large the branches were, and then I thought about what must be under my feet and all the roots and how far they must go. So yeah, I was probably just standing there and staring at that tree for a really long time. And then, carefree as ever, he ran off, grabbed his headphones, and went to his room to listen to his favorite fantasy audiobooks, leaving me in the kitchen to think about how to fix this. On the one hand, I was relieved because all of those worst-case scenarios were unfounded. But now a new set of worries was popping up for me. What do people think about my son, and how do they treat him, especially when I can't be there to protect him? When I was growing up, I didn't fit in with kids my age either. In elementary school, I was sent to a gifted program, which was in a different elementary school in our local district. The kids at that school were not kind to us gifted kids, and the playground was especially rough. One day I found an old, rusted structure that was tucked up against the back of the field, up against the forest, and I collected some wood and some pieces of sticks and logs, and I built us a fort. And from that day forward, a group of us sat in that fort and ate lunch every day, talking, telling stories, and just feeling safe and separate from the rest of that school. Fast forward to high school, and I'm a bit of a rebel. I've got bleached hair, I've got a nose ring, and I take pride in not fitting in. At our local high school, there was a bagel place across the street where everyone would go after school to kind of hang out and get a snack. And one day I was walking out of the bagel place, pop in the back of my Snapple, when I see my sister, she was just a year younger than me, talking to a group of girls. And as I get closer, I can hear what they're saying, and as soon as they see me, they scatter. They had been trying and pretending to be friends with her while trying to get her to eat pieces of broken glass, saying, "This is what friends do." Now, you might be wondering who would eat broken glass simply because someone tells them to. Well, my sister has Williams syndrome. It's very much like autism, but with a slight twist. People with Williams are extremely kind and loving to everyone, and they're really unable to tell when people are being unkind in return. I remember in elementary school sitting on the bus with my sister while all the kids ruthlessly teased her, and she thought they were being her friends, but I just sat there and absorbed all of that hate. And throughout the years, I felt the brunt of a lot of my sister's bullying, as well as my own inability to fit in, and I learned to adopt a shell to protect myself. So now, as an adult, standing there in my kitchen, I knew that I wanted above all else to find a way to protect my own son from these same sort of experiences. So the next day, I logged on to my online parent support group for twice exceptional kids, And I told them the story of Finn and his walk, and I asked them for their advice. Someone suggested that he start wearing a camera around his neck. That way, when he was standing and lost in thought and thinking about things, people would think that he was merely just waiting for the perfect photographic shot. That seemed like a really clever idea to me, but when I proposed it to my son Finn, he was less than enthusiastic. He said, "Okay, Mom, I'll do that if you want, but I don't see what the big deal is. Why do we care what other people think? Why does it matter?" And I looked at him, my adorable son with his big brown eyes and that mop of floppy hair, just full of love for the world. And I realized that he was right. Why should it matter what other people think? Why does it matter if somebody misunderstands our kindness or our thoughtfulness or our intelligence or our quirkiness? So Finn went back to walking home every day just as before, bringing home dead birds on the ends of sticks, pockets full of nuts and bolts that he'd found, shiny rocks, interesting leaves. He once brought home a hubcap he found in the gutter because it would be the perfect thing to turn into a shield to go along with the grenade launcher he created out of an old discarded vacuum. In fact, I'm pretty sure at this point everyone in our neighborhood knows if they leave any piece of furniture out for free, maybe a slightly deflated yoga ball or a rollable Tupperware that only has a small crack, my son Finn will be by to take it off their hands for them. I'm still learning to let things go, and I make mistakes. One night at a restaurant, Finn was bouncing up and down at the booth and banging his head against the back of the seat. And I told him to stop because that's not what normal people do. Later that night, I apologized. Finn is nearly 13 now, but I still worry. I'm a mother, and the world can be an unkind place. But I'm doing my best to take my cues from him so that my children and I will be proud of who we are, and we won't try to fix it. Thank you.
Abby, it's find myself a little choked up as a parent. So thank you for that. You know, there's sorry, just let me regather myself here. I had a great conversation with the matriarch in our family as I was thinking about this stories event. And Abby, your story about Finn and your sister and yourself as a parent really reminded me of that conversation. And I recall her saying, stories are important because they are meaningful. They're meaningful because they are memorable, impactful, and personally connect. And that's definitely done that. All of these stories have definitely done that, and really, really appreciate you sharing, especially as a parent. And it did remind me of a parent quote that my family member shared, and because she was connecting it to her own personal journey. And we started to talk, ironically about, or coincidentally about parenting and family and what it means. And she raised this Maya Angelou quote that I'll share with you in connection to what it means to parent and support and believe and inspire your kids in their own journey, in their own way, in their own life. And it's just your story really connected for me. And the quote she shared was, one of the greatest gifts anybody can give us is an inspiration to develop courage. If people feel comfortable enough to develop some courage, then they can do anything they really want to do. Why? They can devise their own lives, right? And in hearing about Finn and the way he is in processing his own life is living Maya Angelou's words, and you as a parent are doing the very same. Thank you so much, Abby. Really appreciate you. So at this time, we're going to take a pop-up question about college readiness. And the poll should jump up here in a second. What percentage of students entering college require remedial coursework? Looks like most folks believe about 50 to 75% require some remedial coursework as they enter college. At least a third believe 26 to 50% of kids require that. Well, The actual fact is that 28 to 40% of students entering college require remedial courses. Most students in our country experience the same education system their parents experienced, though the world looks vastly different. While there may be some accommodation of student interests and learning needs, everyone advances at a similar pace, regardless of whether they have mastered what's been asked of them, or if they need additional time, or reach their learning target. In a personalized competency-based learning environment, learning is customized to meet students' needs, where they are, creating engaging learning experiences customized to each learner's strengths. Now it's my pleasure to welcome our final speaker, Brittany Terry, who will tell us about a special teacher who helped her imagine a different future for herself. Thank you, Brittany.
I was 17 years old when I found out that breakfast was a meal that people ate every day. I had just bought a bagel from the school cafeteria and apologized to my friends for needing it. They brushed it off, told me that they had already eaten at home. "You mean to tell me that you eat breakfast each day?" Of course that's what they meant. I wasn't angry when I learned this. I was relieved. See, I was a senior in high school and up to this point had spent most of the classes I had before lunch less concerned about learning new content and more concerned about trying to get my stomach not to growl. I would have bruises on my abdomen because I would take my fingers and dig them deeply into my stomach. It was loud and embarrassing, and I was relieved because I finally understood why I seemed to be the only one who was hungry all the time. My childhood home was not a place of safety or love. I grew up in poverty. I didn't have enough clothes that I could wear a different shirt each day of the week. All my new shoes came with holes. The wall next to the mattress where I slept on the floor was so rotted through that cold air and bugs would come in. I didn't have a winter coat. When my teachers asked my parents to send me in something that would keep me dry in the Seattle rain, they cut holes in a garbage bag. I had one thin, dark brown scratchy blanket. Cut wires protruded from it where it once held warmth for whoever owned it before me. I took it off my mattress each morning to hang on to my otherwise barren door frame. It offered the same weak protection to the volatile anger outside of my room during the day as it offered protection from the cold during the night. My siblings and I used to hide behind that blanket and play a game, perhaps to lighten the fear that I know we all felt where we guessed what my dad was breaking that day. I still remember the sound as a large light blue clamshell lamp shattered against the basement wall where my dad had thrown it. I don't remember who won that day, who had guessed correctly what had broken. I do remember that large pieces of glass littered the floor for weeks. Maybe if we never acknowledged that the lamp had broken, we could pretend that we weren't being broken either. Suffice it to say, I was not ripe with potential walking into my 9th grade English class, although at least by 14 I knew not to wear garbage bags to school. I was in the exact same classroom with the exact same teacher that my brother had sat in just the year before, a class that he had failed. My oldest brother had already dropped out of high school after not earning any credits at the alternative school where he had been sent. Education couldn't be important to my family because day-to-day survival was, and classwork doesn't pay for food or electricity. By the time I was in middle school, my mom was working at Burger King, and despite living less than a mile away, I hadn't seen my dad in years. I had a paper route. Every day as I got older, I traded that paper route for a job at the grocery store, where I often worked right after school until 11 o'clock at night. I remember the stress each morning of pumping gas as it approached $1 because that's all we had to last throughout the day, and all the extra change had already been claimed. Throughout this time, I put very little effort into everything that I did because if I didn't try and failed, it had no bearing on my actual ability, and that was safe. And more important to me than success, learning, or growth was safety. The first assignment in that class was a paper on a book of our choosing. There weren't any parameters to this book report, or more likely, I didn't care or know enough about rubrics to follow one. I never would have chosen Anna Karenina or A Tale of Two Cities on my own. A book of over 100 pages would never do. I did, after all, have a job to get to. I don't recall the name of the book, the author, but I do remember that it was 87 pages long. One morning right before class, I sat down to research this book. And by research, I definitely mean that I was looking up a summary of it online. But in my search, I stumbled across a commentary by the author about why he wrote this book. And perhaps it's because I entered an unjust world too early, but I've always been intrigued by the question why. And there was nothing noble or groundbreaking in his answer. The author was just trying to pay his bills. In fact, he had set aside a larger, more important project, a project much more meaningful for him, just for a paycheck so that he could survive another month. And while I didn't understand working towards long-term goals, I certainly understood doing what was necessary to pay bills and what it took to survive. I could empathize with this author. And for the first time, I poured my heart into my work. Not that I had high expectations for what I did. I learned at a very young age that expectations just ended up hurting me. Sometime later, I got the paperback, and I casually flipped to the back to check my grade. It is, after all, what everyone else was doing, caring about their grades, and I was trying to play the part. To the murmur of others expressing dismay or eagerly showing off their work to others, I set my jaw to lock in any emotion that I might feel. And this moment made such an impression on me that over 20 years later, I can recall it with perfect clarity. Where I was sitting in the room, the lighting, the movement of people around me, the curve of his letters, and the exact shade of red that he used to write. Your writing is mature, graceful, and unique. You need to go to college. And time stood still for me in that moment. I'd never considered the possibility of college before. I didn't even know that it was an option for someone like me until Mr. Barrett told me that it was. Not only does this moment stand out to me as a door opening into this whole other world where none had existed before, but perhaps more importantly, at 14, this was the first time in my life that someone had shown me my potential, what I was capable of. It was the first time in my life that somebody believed in me. And how is a child, how is any child supposed to believe in herself when no one else believes in her first? Over the years, I've asked why a lot. I've wondered why that author wrote that book. I still wonder why I've never earned the approval of my parents. In the last couple of years, I've wondered why I'm teaching when it seems it's so overwhelming and seemingly fruitless. And on my hardest days, I think of Mr. Barrett, who passed away years before I thought to reach out to him to tell him what his one scribbled comment did to the trajectory of my life. How I did go to college, that I graduated summa cum laude with a master's degree, that I've gone on to pursue a doctorate, that I broke the cycle for my own kids, that I became a 4th grade teacher because that's the age I realized that the things happening to me weren't happening to other kids. And more than anything, I needed my teachers to love and pour into me. Teachers plant seeds, and we often don't get to see the fruit of them. And those are seeds of greatness, because there is greatness in each child, not just the ones who are bright, who have the parental support at home to understand the importance of an education, but it's in the ones who are late or don't come at all. It's in the ones who struggle academically and emotionally and behaviorally, the ones who are so angry for reasons you should be so grateful you don't understand. It's in the ones who are unmotivated, who don't like you. It's in the ones who are dirty and hungry, who wear garbage bags to school. There's greatness in each child, and our job as educators, it is to help them find it. It is to help them see it in themselves, because I had teachers who saw greatness in me, and that has made all the difference in my life. Thank you.
I had to take some moments to breathe there, Brittany. Thank you so much for sharing all of yourself with all of us. I think the comments continue to capture the words better than I can say them. And I encourage all of our storytellers just to read just the impact you are having on each of us as we listen and we connect. And Brittany, it's I'm just going to pull up your own words because they're just fantastic. There is greatness in each child, and educators are. I added this piece, that those treasure hunters, to identify those treasures that exist in every child, much like Mr. Barrett did for you, who then created this multiplier effect in you for your kids and for your learning community. It also helped us to remember that as we focus on tests and instruction and pedagogy and feedback, remember that our kids are coming with their own tests that they're wrestling and tackling with that have nothing to do with school, but have everything to do with them and their lives. Brittany, thank you so much for sharing all of you, your purpose, your wisdom, your life experiences in such a powerful, meaningful way. Really appreciate it. Let me get back on track here. I'm sorry. Well, let's do this. Please, if everyone could just join me in celebrating our amazing storytellers. Please, I know you've posted feedback in chat, but if you could please just, celebrate them via chat any way you think is appropriate. I just want to give, because I have a microphone, I can at least give you a amazing round of applause and just true heartfelt thank you to each of you for sharing who you are and your purpose. So everyone knows our next steps are to edit and post the video. So please keep a lookout for that, or sign up for our KnowledgeWorks newsletter, who will then inform you that is forthcoming. And before we conclude for the evening, again, I just can't do it enough. We can't do it enough. Please, let's thank our speakers, Emily Berman, Nancy Klein, Samaya Wright, Abby Kerrigan, and Brittany Terry. Thank you all. We'd all like to express thanks to everyone who submitted stories to us for consideration, along with the Moss team and the KnowledgeWorks staff members who made this event just terrific. Thank you all. And we hope each of you who listened and connected in your own ways enjoyed today's event, and that it has inspired you to think about your own stories, about your own why, and what's possible, and about how education has changed your ideas about what is possible. Perhaps you'll even be inspired by the courageous storytellers we heard today and share your story with someone else, because you're bringing those treasures, much like our storytellers have done for us and those folks that they referenced have done for them. Thanks all. Really appreciate you. And thank you. Good night.